I know we chatted, I think that was like January.
Mm-hmm.
It was cold.
Yep.
You were there rallying to bring awareness to USAID. I don't remember exactly the name of the rally to help not dismantle the organization. And now we're sitting here in the middle of April, and that dismantling is, maybe it's not fully there, but it's close. What have you been trying to do the last few months since we kind of last heard your voice?
Well, survive is one element, and also do what I can for my family to make sure that we can adapt to current costs when both of us are out of work at the same time. So, applying for WIC, applying for SNAP, applying for forbearance on our mortgage, doing whatever we can to make sure that we can live in Washington, D.C. with zero income coming in. But second to that is a continued passion for advocacy. I think there are two camps of people who have worked at USAID. There's some that think it's over and we might as well find a new way forward. And there's another camp that thinks this is still illegal. Even though they have done what they've done, they aren't allowed to do it. It still requires an act of Congress to dismantle this independent agency, much like many of the other agencies like USIP.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So we continue to fight and go to Congress at least roughly once a week. We go around bringing constituent letters to different representatives, Republicans, Democrats alike, to try to set up meetings, sit with them. It's always been bipartisanly supported for the last 60 years, but there seems to be some amnesia. So talking to them about why they should stand up and make changes. Cory Booker was one of those meetings, and graciously, in his filibuster, he read 2 USAID letters, one of which is a good friend of Shala's and mine. And so he read her letter aloud. So bringing awareness and trying to see where we can stop the avalanche of wrong.
Stop the bleeding.
Stop the bleeding.
And Shala, you guys, you've worked also for how long? You've been USAID for how long?
About 10 years.
10 years, and how about you?
So I was a USAID implementer for about, 18 years, and then the last 2 years directly for USAID. Working now, most recently I work for Humanitarian Assistance, the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. I was actually in Uganda when they shut down my access, disabled my account. I was still actually actively working on programming there and had to figure out how to get back. But that said, before that I worked in counterterrorism and countering violent extremism on behalf of USAID in different conflict places, South Sudan and Lebanon and other places.
And you've been doing much the same. What have the last 3 months been like? And you're to confirm, paychecks have been coming in. Not you
No.
can say this or not, but not getting paid.
I haven't gotten paid since January 28th was my last day.
And you?
Me neither. I actually got terminated twice,
Oh.
interestingly enough, because this administration is very well organized. And I actually got doxxed by DOGE. And my first termination, interestingly enough, I found out not because the administration, USAID or DOGE sent me my notification. It's because it had gotten leaked on the internet and that I was going to be terminated, and found that out that way. So it's been quite a whirlwind, and then found out that all my personal information was on the internet, on DOGE's site also, because people were like, hey, guess what? I can see your address. I can see your phone number. I can see your private information. So that obviously brings its own level of stress and worry, especially given all the rhetoric that's been around in the vitriol about USAID and who we are. And so that has been a bit of a challenge. I have also been without a paycheck since February. And for me, a lot of my focus has been supporting the lawsuits that are going on, helping to funnel information for the various USAID lawsuits, helping people to find legal services where needed, and then the same thing, being a supporter of strategic communications. I was just on the Hill on Thursday as well, meeting with different staffers for the Senate and the House, and also thinking about what additional strategies, because we do know that, as she said, it's always been bipartisan, and there are still behind closed doors, and I won't mention them by name right now because we're hoping that we can still continue to push the needle, but who are still saying that we know that this is ultimately going to make America less safe, less prosperous, and it's not going to be as strong with the closing of USAID, but they're like, we want to follow the president's legislative agenda, even though we know it's going to hurt Americans. And that has been us trying to put a face to that, and also thinking about what are going to be the strategies that actually help them to see, like, it's going to be irreparable damage, and you're going to be hurting your constituents, and figure out what's in your personal interest. How do we address that? And so that's a lot of the work that we're doing, is finding those things that are going to resonate with these different members of Congress, who are the only ones that can do anything at this point.
How do you do it, though, without not thinking about just your situation, your baby, your husband, your family, your life? It's like, I gotta eat, like the hell with strategic communications. Like, I don't mean to be so like crass about it, but how do you do that and still focus on the work?
I think there's this mistaken notion that this is a zero-sum game, and that if we as a nation are providing for the poor, the hungry, the sick in other countries, it takes away from Americans. And that's actually not the case. With less than 1% of the budget, this is going to have zero effect on the national deficit. And noting that there are so many other cuts that are happening to American services, Medicaid, Social Security, Veterans Affairs, it was never about saving money from money that we went to other countries to bring to Americans. It was never about that. So I think it's about making the connections to our plight, though being much less than what people are suffering from in other parts of the world. But making those connections, and that's what I tried to do a little bit in my hearing when I spoke about the fact that my daughter will need to go to a doctor, and there are babies everywhere who are showing up to clinics that are closed. The fact that my daughter needs to get formula through WIC, which I'm grateful for that program, but that program doesn't exist in other parts, and there are babies who are unable to be fed and that are hungry on the streets. So I think it's, yes, recognizing that I have struggles without a paycheck, but there are some services here that I can rely on where nothing like that exists somewhere else. And so bringing light to those situations, and not just to how detrimental it is to the people in the countries in which we work, but also how they were equal partners in raising up their own country and their own communities. Where other donors from around the world would match the funds from USAID, and they can't make up the balance. So it wasn't just the U.S. sort of throwing money around for no good. Others were very much involved in it, and we were also betraying them in this process. So it's about, yes, bringing your own story to light, but you have to also recognize you don't live alone in this world. I recognize that. My husband recognizes that. My best friend does. My family does. They recognize it because, infectious disease doesn't stay on one country. It moves. So do other situations of poverty and criminality and war. And terrorism and violent extremism. Those things never just stay on one shore. COVID was an example. 9/11 is an example. So making those connections to our everyday ups and downs to what's happening in other parts of the world it's hard for me to see it any other way.
It must be helpful to have, I don't need to ask too much more, but it must be helpful to have each other, as you've talked about, here particularly for other friends in your community, in your line of service, but it must be really helpful to have this bond to kind of talk about and hash some of this stuff out.
Yes and no. Yes, in that, of course, the bond and the friendship is strong, and we're here to lean on one another. But I hate to see so many of my friends and community suffering, and the mental health challenges are becoming more and more overwhelming. People are not doing well. There are no jobs to apply for. Several people I know are leaving the country. We're applying for jobs in other parts of the country, which means bringing my daughter away from her grandparents. We have friends who have taken their own life. We have people who have been lost in despair. So as much as it's helpful to have camaraderie, we don't want to all be sinking at the same time. I would want them to succeed even if we struggle. And it's hard to see hope as time goes on. It's hard to see possibilities, which drives me more towards the advocacy, because it gives me I learned about corporeal politics the other day, which is like put your body in a place that illustrates to you that you're doing something different. So whether it's a protest or getting arrested at the Capitol or showing up at at the Capitol Hill to talk with senators or staffers or whoever we can talk to, or whether it's presenting at a hearing, I will put my body every place that I need to put it to try to stop what's happening.
I think one thing that people don't realize, having worked in conflict and violent extremism and been in some of the most precarious places in the world, you're doing that work and it may not be your country, but you're seeing people hurt, and there's something called vicarious trauma. And I think that's what we're also experiencing now, not only the trauma of losing our jobs, not only the trauma of seeing this passion, this career that we've been a part of, that we've sunk our whole lives into, but also the trauma of knowing I still talk to staff that are in Uganda and South Sudan and Syria and all sorts of places. I see my friends who are losing their job and now wondering what they're going to do. And so it's me dealing with my own trauma and trying to manage that and keep some sense of hope, as she said, but also it's a fresh wave of trauma with each one of these stories. Every time I talk to a person, like even right now, I think about that, and having seen the worst of what can happen in these places. I mean, we know, for instance, in South Sudan right now, it's one of the most dangerous places in the world currently. And there's a program there, a peace program that was flagship. And it was the first time a South Sudanese was leading that program. Right now, that program is not paying its bills because the government has cut off that funding. The government of South Sudan does not take kindly to that. And so now we know that this chief of party, his life's in danger, all the staff's lives in danger, because all the expats are gone. And so they're going to have to face the music. And the fear of that gives me trauma. It keeps me up at night. And I think the same way, that's why I'm like, I can't stop fighting. But beyond that, it's also the fact that what happened to USAID is also reflective of what's going to happen in the rest of our country. We're seeing it with Department of Education. Like I said, we're seeing Medicaid cuts. We're seeing these things, and those will also, it's like a test case. And so if we can't stop it here, then we're not going to stop it anywhere. And I think that's the reason why, like, USAID is our focus, but it's also trying to build momentum for people to keep fighting what's going on generally in our country.
Lawlessness must be stopped. The courts are doing what they can. They're still being ignored. So really, it's the push for us is through Congress. And that takes rowdy town halls. That
Vibrant
takes
civil society.
We've submitted probably at this point thousands of constituent letters that we've collected through social media. We have templates. It takes showing up at their offices when they're on break, when these representatives are on break and back in their home states. Next week is Take Your Children to Work Day, so I don't have a job. We will all be taking our children to Capitol Hill and showing up at representative offices to continue the work of advocacy, but with our children.
Okay. You said a lot, and a lot. It's like I want to air all of it, and I'm going to find a way to do that. Maybe put the whole interview on YouTube or something like that. But I appreciate your.
I appreciate it. There's we were just talking today about the decisions some people are having to make just to bring money in through the door, and there are people with multiple degrees, decades of experience, who are now Uber drivers, food delivery, applying for waitressing jobs, and even that economy isn't doing very well because who's ordering food or going to a restaurant or what have you. So it's like I have a friend who's babysitting, just whatever you can do to get by.
Bike tours on the National
Bike
Mall.
tours.
And excited about it because it's something.
You're
right?
doing that?
No, a colleague of mine I
Oh,
just saw on the hill, he's like, I got a part-time job. I was like, really? He's so excited. He's like, yeah, 3 days a week I get to do bike tours on the mall.
Yeah, probably.
He's like, I get to work out.
$20 an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you. And your first name again was?
Shala.
Spell for me.
SCHALA.
And your last name?
Battle.
B-A-T-T-L-E.
BATTLE.
It's appropriate.
Yeah. I know, it's funny. I've been working in conflict, 18 years.
That
and everyone
last
said,
name not
oh,
lost on
Battle,
you?
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I understand.
Well, and it's we were saying it like it is, and it's also just not one thing right now.
Yeah.
Like my mom is disabled, elderly, brain damage. We rely on Medicaid and Social Security to supplement what we're already paying for. And if those things, which are slated to be decreased and eliminated, like what am I going to do, right? What are we going to do? I think, and yeah, that's why I keep fighting.
Yeah.
Like,
It's not just to bring a paycheck in.
No.
I mean, it's always been a calling, it's always been a passion, but at the same time, there are people who rely on us.
yeah.
We are the safety net for several of our family members sometimes, and we won't be able to do that. I just told my parents, like, don't fall down.
Yeah. I think the other thing that people don't realize about, I mean, of them going on after any agency first, this was not a smart one for them because USAID folks run towards the fire. We are in the worst places in the world. We get very little credit. People don't know what we're doing. I've been in places where ISIS was present. I worked on the border of Syria where there were no Americans, right? So we run towards the fighter, but we're also about winning hearts and minds. That's what USA does. That's how we keep each other safer. That's how we keep Americans safer here and abroad. That's how we keep America's influence in the world. So we know that. And so at this point, we know how to organize.
Yeah.
We know how to work in the face of the threats that we're hearing, of the resistance that we're getting. And so the one thing that's been inspiring to me, I think, through this is seeing us galvanize and move together and kind of having this real grassroots movement. And I don't think people are going to stop. Even those who have now been lucky enough to figure out a way to go overseas, I think that's just giving them a little breathing room so they can reorient and strategize more and lean in a bit more.